What's good, everybody? I hope you're enjoying your afternoon. It's time to disrupt your afternoon with EC Radio. You could follow along on all social media platforms, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, Facebook, Periscope. You know the drill, people. Before we get into anything, much love to my sponsors. Shout out to my peeps over at EJA Moving Services, the professional movers. When you're ready to move and relocate, hit them up at ejamoving.com. There's no task they can't handle. They can move pretty much whatever. They'll move your studio. They'll move gym equipment. They'll move your grandmother to a nursing home. They'll move you to California. They'll move you pretty much anything, anywhere, anytime. Give them a call today, 315-335-0516. Shout out to my attorney, Dave Longaretto, who's been keeping me out of trouble since like the 90s. Give him a call today at 315-735-6162. Big ups to my peeps over at Utica Coffee. Wake the hell up, Utica, wakethehellup.com. And big ups to my friends over at the Saranac Brewery. You know, a couple months back, I started this contest over at Reverbnation, and shout out to everybody over at Reverbnation for letting me do this contest. And we opened it up to bands that would like to join EC Radio with me. I don't know why they would want to do that, but I had to go through 1,500 submissions. And one big shout out to my boy Gabe Altamiro for helping me listen to 1,500 submissions. We had a good time listening to all of them, and there's so much great music out there. It was really, really hard to pick through 1,500 bands, but we did make a couple decisions. I was allowed to pick 3, and joining me today is one of the bands, or one of the members of the band that I picked, Biscay, all the way from London, UK. Joining me today is Phil. Phil, how are you, man? Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure. Great to see you, Z. Nice to be reaching out across the ocean, as we say.
Right. You know, consider the current state of affair that our country is in right now. I'm sure you're pretty much laughing at us right now, right?
Well, you know, I'm not sure we're in any position to laugh at you guys. There was a great T-shirt that you could get shortly after Trump was elected, and we obviously got out of the EU. Brexit started, so it was 2016. And you could get this great T-shirt which had the US and the UK maps together, saying "I'm with stupid," which I thought was pretty good. So I don't think we're in any position to criticize, you know.
Yeah, man, for sure. And, you know, I hate to talk politics, but, you know, it's pretty random that I've got somebody from another country from across the ocean right now, the day after, you know, the Capitol was interrupted and all the chaos that happened in D.C. today. And I was just kind of wondering what your opinion is on all of that, you know, being from the UK. And
well, you know, we can get very pompous about democracy in the UK, can't we? Because you know, we have supposedly the mother of all parliaments. But, you know, I think our democracy has come into disrepute of late as well. I think politicians have become increasingly populist across the world. And I think the advent of this is one of the bad aspects of social media, is that it's encouraging politics by tweet, and everything therefore becomes lowest common denominator, very binary. And it just feeds into all of this, and people believe what the algorithms make them want to hear, you know. So I just think if we're going to learn anything from this whole escapade, it's that, you know, we can definitely do things a great deal better, and I'm quite optimistic about that. You know, looking to the future, it's not going to be an easy thing to reconcile.
Definitely not.
The differences in the US. Nor indeed, I mean, we're kind of getting there over here with regard to Brexit, because it's now happened. And there's a great deal more acceptance about that, whether it's right or wrong. So we're in a mentality now over here where we're just going to get on with it. You know, we need to get through COVID and then just get on with it. And I'm sure you'll be the same. You know, it's just right now, it's a bit fraught.
Absolutely. You ain't kidding, brother. And like I said, I hate talking about politics, so let's get off the whole political thing. You did mention social media, and we did this contest through Reverbnation. How important is Reverbnation for Biscay in your music career?
Well, you know what? More than anything, the great thing about being on Reverbnation is it allows you to realize that there are people out there who think what you're doing is good when they don't know you at all. So you submit to all kinds of competitions, whether it's podcasts like this or radio stations, or we've won free mastering, free mixes, all this kind of thing through Reverbnation. And what's really gratifying is that someone somewhere, often over the ocean, picks up your stuff and goes, yeah, this is great. And so you can have a free mix or a free master, or we'll put you on this podcast. And it's really encouraging, when it's very difficult, because let's be honest, there is really great music out there. As you said, you listen to 1,500 bands. My God,
Yeah.
there's almost too much music.
Was.
There's certainly too much music for everyone who's producing it to make a living out of it. So it's things like Reverbnation are really encouraging to people like us, and makes you want to keep going and keep being creative and keep going in the studio and keep doing gigs when they happen.
Right.
But yeah, that's the main benefit I get from Reverbnation. Certainly, is the encouragement.
So when I first listened to your and great music, by the way, the song that you submitted to me was called "Worn Out Word." Was the name of that song, which had me going, man. And I'll tell you, that's good, funky Saturday afternoon music where you're cleaning the house and you're vacuuming and doing dishes and whatnot. I just really got into the groove listening to you guys. So now when I listen to your band, I get this Jamiroquai influence, and kind of like Jamiroquai meets like Amy Winehouse. Are those two bands that are on your radar as far as influences go?
Oh, sure. I mean, Amy was a genius whose life was cut short. Indeed. Terribly. She was amazing. Truly amazing talent, and just unfortunately a victim of modern day media again. Although perhaps more newspapers then than social media, but nevertheless, it's the same kind of thing. And Jamiroquai, certainly. Certainly a lot of our vibe is that kind of early 80s into 90s acid jazz sort of, which was pretty big over here and pretty big globally, actually. But we go even further back than that. Our influences go back to Steely Dan.
I hear Steely Dan in your music too.
Because their stuff right from the get-go was this amazing combination of kind of jazz sophistication with pop song kind of, the approach to being relatively popular with the jazz idiom. And that to me is the great combination, because I love a lot of pop music, rock music, all kinds of stuff. But I'm also trained in jazz, as most of us in the band are, So we love to be able to take a bit of what we know in terms of that slightly more sophisticated harmony and rhythm and this sort of thing, and put it into something that's still quite accessible. So that's where you end up, doing things that a lot of people say, Jamiroquai, or one person said to me, "You're like Steely Dan meets Bjork," which I really like, because Elliot, our singer, who you will get to meet and chat to, she's French, and therefore, we definitely, when she joined the band, which was back in 2016, 2017, we did not want her to not sound French. We didn't want to force kind of like either mid-Atlantic or an English accent on her. We wanted her to sound French when she sings, in the way that Bjork. Right? Yeah, and I think that really works and gives us something very, very distinctive.
Yeah, man. Are you hip to some of the jam bands that are going on here in the United States, like some of the funk bands such as like Lettuce or Turquoise or say Ripe or any of those bands? Yeah.
Lettuce are great. White Denim as well. White Denim, they're amazing.
Yep, great band.
America has a fantastic tradition for this kind of music, and amazing musicians as well. I also used to love Fish as well. They were a cool jam band.
Oh yeah.
As well. So yeah, there's a lot of that we definitely get into over the water, and there's a lot of that here as well.
I was just going to ask that.
Yeah, because there's kind of a constant stream of amazing musicians coming out of the music schools here, particularly. If you want to talk about people who really can jam, because they've kind of been trained. I did a year at Berkeley in Boston, so I have been over there and lived in your great country. It's been a privilege, and I went to Berkeley for a year. That was back in, it's quite a while ago now. I'm showing my age, but that was back in 2001, 2002, that I spent a year at Berkeley. And it made me aware of just how high the standards are in America of musicianship. Therefore, it's no wonder that you've got those kind of bands that are constantly, sort of growing and there's more and more of them. And we have it over here because there's this constant stream of young, great musicians. I just hope that they can all make a living somehow, which is the difficulty.
Right. Well, prior to COVID, how was the scene out in the UK? I picture it as being very multi-genre, and like, are all these genres popular in the UK and in London and on your scene?
Oh, sure. I mean, I live in London. We're doing this from London,
Mm-hmm.
and London is a real melting pot. It's just like New York,
Right.
LA to an extent, but particularly like New York. And it's that diversity of population that just you can go out. Well, pre-COVID, you could go out any night in London and see pretty much any kind of music that you wanted to see if you knew where to go. And some of that's very underground. There's a lot of small venues. I mean, how they've coped in the last year is really hard to say. But it's a really healthy scene in London. Once it returns,
Yeah.
I just hope it can return.
Yeah.
To be, and it may take a while before it comes back. To be at full strength again. But it's certainly something that is a fantastic aspect of living here. And you do have that in some of the other major cities as well. Manchester is a good scene. Even cities like Bristol, not necessarily that well known over the water, but Bristol has a fantastic music scene and very diverse. So yeah, there's a lot going on over here. But I suspect there's a lot going on everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Pre-COVID, so are you guys like a touring regional band? You a touring European band, or you just stay local around London?
Mostly local in London, and as local as we could, as we can allow. It's kind of, but it's really difficult to actually sort of do regular gigs and get a regular audience because there's so much supply. What we focused on in the last, and we was kind of doing this even before COVID started. We started going, right, okay, rather than keep repeating the same gigs to the same audiences again and again, and keeping asking the same people to keep coming to your gigs, we actually thought we'd consolidate a bit and do a lot more writing and recording and try and develop our profile a bit more on the streaming platforms. And we've had a bit of success with that on Spotify particularly. Mm-hmm. And then actually go, okay, with a slightly better profile, can we now actually start to get better gigs? But, one of the really nice things, and this happened via Reverbnation as well as other platforms, is when you get asked to play festivals. I mean, we love playing festivals because you can imagine, I mean, you've heard some of our music, Z, you know that it's kind of pretty feel-good stuff in terms of the groove. I mean, a lot of our lyrics are pretty dark, so we have this kind of strange contrast in our music of quite serious subject matter sometimes and dark issues and subjects with this funky vibe in the music. But that means that actually for festivals, a lot of people like listening to us on a sunny afternoon. We fit in well in that scene. Indeed. And we certainly hope that, again, when maybe this summer might be a little bit too early. We don't know yet. But we're hoping that once that scene starts to come back a little bit, that will be the best place for us to try and get gigs. That's for sure.
Have you guys been rehearsing, or have you been doing live streams or any of that nature?
We haven't live streamed because we have the problem of a little bit of geographic diversity. There's 3 of us in the band in London, and there's 2 in the band that are in Birmingham.
Copy
Not
that.
Birmingham, Alabama, Birmingham, UK, right? And so getting us together is actually physically quite challenging, especially in a situation like COVID. We have actually managed to do a bit of rehearsing. Between the lockdowns, we have this amazing place that's on the border of England and Wales that we go to. It's like a residential, it's a big old Victorian house. You can't see another house from it. It's in the middle of nowhere. And we go there to do kind of intensive 3-4 day rehearsals and get a lot of material together. And we managed to do that at the end of September, just gone, which was amazing because it's the first time we'd seen each other in quite a long time. And we were so productive. About 8 new songs came out of that, just that weekend. It's not a recording place. It's just where we play and get stuff together. So the nice thing is there's this really good pipeline for us now of new material that we're starting to record. Obviously, there's also the difficulty of getting in the studio at the moment because most of the studios won't allow you in, not as a whole band. And that stuff you've heard of us. I mean, we tend to record live or semi-live. We play in the recording studio simultaneously, and then we might do a few overdubs. We'll do a guide vocal with the whole band playing, and then we'll re-record the lead vocal. And I might overdub guitar solos, the keyboard player overdub keyboard player, the keyboard solos or extra parts. But what you hear is mostly a live band on those recordings, because that's how we've all been brought up, and it's how we like to play.
And that's
we like that kind of, that's the feel we like.
Mm-hmm.
When we go into a studio, we like to still sound like a live band, because we want to sound like us. We don't want to sound like something that's been produced to sound like something else. Mm-hmm. I don't understand why bands would do that.
Right.
Just sound like you. And so that's always the approach we take. So we're hoping that we're going to get back into the studio before too long, because we've got a load of material that we want to get down and to get out there.
Well, at least you guys you've been active, though, and thank God for technology too. Like, if you have an idea, you could send an idea to your buddy or your bandmate, and technology is everything right now, especially when it comes to the industry that we all work in. It's shut down.
Yeah, well, it's like 3 out of the 5 of us all have reasonably good recording facilities at home. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do, the drummer does, and the keyboard player does, and between us, we can actually record remotely. We prefer to ultimately get in the studio and do it live, but we can put scratch tracks and stuff like that together very easily from home. And that really helps us sort of build ideas and get stuff together as well. So we haven't been idle. I think from the point of view of our creativity, it's probably been one of the best years we've ever had, ironically. It's just that we can't gig. Yeah. And we can't rehearse as much as we'd like,
Crazy on how much silver lining has attached to COVID, right? There is a bunch of silver lining.
Yeah, I mean, the slightly frustrating thing is that I think, I might say this, mightn't I? But I think I've written some of the best songs that we're yet to record this year. And that's slightly frustrating because you want to obviously get out and do it, either play it live and see how it goes down live, or get into the studio as soon as possible. But I'm going to have to sit on this material now for the next 6 to 12 months before it, sees the light of day. So that's the only frustration. But
is your writing influenced on current events right now and what's going on with our issues?
Tell me about it. Yeah. I mean, it's funny, you mentioned Worn Out Word was the one you listened to. We've brought out two singles since that EP. We brought out one on November the 1st. I mean, this is the approach we're now taking to releasing material. We think it's a bit better to do it a single at a time because it seems to help get us onto playlists and stuff. Yep. So we released a single on the 1st of November last year called Blame Game. And you can imagine what that's all about. The blame game that everybody's playing at the moment in politics and just about everywhere else. So, and that's got a pretty provocative video to go with it on our YouTube channel that we made. So that's very much about what's going on right now. And then we've just released a new single on the 27th of December called The Fire Below. I think you'll really like that one, Z, actually. If you like Worn Out Word, The Fire Below is really funky.
Love it.
So I think that'll get you going, The Fire Below. But it's also a really positive song, which we thought would be good to release with the new year coming, because The Fire Below is basically about your own individual passion. The one thing that that you want to try and achieve or try and focus on and spend your life doing. And that can be anything. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is, but we all have to recognize that we have this fire below. And sometimes that's suppressed. Sometimes we don't follow what we really are motivated to do because we comply, we fall in with what's expected of us. But the fire below goes, no. Recognize what your true element is and do it, and follow it. So it's a really positive message with a really funky vibe as well. So we thought that was a good New Year release.
Beautiful words, my man. Beautiful words.
Thank you.
That's what I feel it's missing right now from music is that political Rage Against the Machine type of band out there screaming from the mountaintops. And you would think right now, considering the current state of affairs, that there would be that political band out there screaming at the top of the lungs, just, bitching at the man type of thing, So that's good. Yeah. It's refreshing to hear that you're actually writing in that, but it's also in feel-good music.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think that there are plenty of singer-songwriters that you can go and see who are absolutely singing and writing about what's going on now. But
True.
what you tend not to find is that with groove bands, funk bands, the soul bands, this sort of thing, quite often because the groove is so important, the lyrics and the meaning of the songs is sort of set back a little bit and doesn't really have to be anything other than, get on down, you know. And there's nothing wrong with that. Most of James Brown's songs are like that, with some exceptions though. I'm Black and I'm Proud, So it just shows you can write funky stuff that really says something. And we always want our songs to be like that. We don't see the point in just doing something that's funky with a kind of slightly superficial lyric to go with it. So I work very hard on making sure that we're writing stuff that's meaningful, or meaningful to at least to me, and then hopefully the band, and then hopefully to guys like you. That's the way it works, because it has to start with your own authentic belief in something.
Which comes first? Is it the melody or the lyric for you?
Now I'm weird. Because I write the lyrics. I write the lyrics first.
Do you?
And most people don't. Most musicians that we'll talk about will say, no, the music comes first and then you write the lyrics. But I always start with the idea, because I think that without a decent idea and something meaningful to talk about, what's the point in writing a song? So I write the lyrics first. But then what happens is that when I think about, okay, what kind of groove fits the rhythm of those words? And I'll find a groove. And then the music, the melodies, the harmony starts to come. But then, and this is the important thing, then the music starts to take over a bit. And if the lyrics need to change because they don't quite fit into this groove I've written, then I'll start messing with the lyrics as well, taking words out, adding words, reducing syllables, doing whatever. And also because Elia, ultimately being French, has to sing this, she'll turn around to me and say, I'm not singing that word. That's far too difficult to pronounce. That's a weird English word that I would never use. So get rid of it. So then I get sent away by Elliot to kind of rewrite from that perspective as well. So it's a back and forth thing, but it definitely starts with the lyrics.
It's a good feeling. It's a good feeling when you write a song and you knock it out quick instead of just kind of sitting on it for years.
Well, you know what? I quite like both, because it's very satisfying when a song just, as you say, comes out very quickly, gets recorded quickly, and everybody in the band, we all go, yep, we know what to do with this, and it's boom, 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 boom. But I can tell you that the latest single, The Fire Below, that I just described that's just come out, that is at least 3 years old, that song, from when I first wrote it. And we have been through so many different grooves, variations, structures, key changes, melody changes, because we always really loved it, but there was something about it that we were never quite there with it. And so sometimes it's really good to just sit on a song and go, let's put that away for 6 months, get it out again, and see if playing it again freshens it up and there's a new idea or something. Mm-hmm. So in fact, I think that single is way better for having not tried to force it through and been patient enough to go, right, wait until it becomes what it becomes. So and that's the beauty.
Are you want to go back into the archives and listen to some of your old stuff and maybe try to revise a lot of it, or do you just kind of leave them buried?
Well, the funny thing is, we have an EP, our first EP that we recorded with Elia, which was in 2017. So it's a good nearly 4 years old now. And it was her first recording with us. And to be honest with you, we go back and listen to that and think, actually, the songs are good. But she, I know, has her own frustration with her own performance on it, because it was very early days for her. So we may well revisit. I mean, that EP is out and it's out there. It's on the streaming platforms and everything. So it might well be that we do revisit some of that and re-record it, or re-record some of it, and then re-release it. We'll see. I mean, we've got so much new stuff coming through the pipeline that to go back to old stuff like that, that's 4 years old, and try and redo it, is probably not a priority at the moment.
Copy that.
Because it ain't that bad. You know, I mean, we're still quite happy with what we did. It's whether you could make it as good as, you know, what you're producing now. So we'll wait and see. But whatever happens, there's going to be a good, steady stream of new material coming from us through next year and into 2022, definitely.
Awesome. And everybody can check your music out on such platforms as Spotify, Reverbnation, iTunes. What other platforms are you available on?
Well, we've got some YouTube. We don't make a video for every song, but you know, there's a few videos on YouTube. There's one of us live as well. It's only one song, but you get the sense of, you know, what we can do live as well. Our website's pretty good for linking everything up. And there's more stuff on the website with regard to, you know, sort of history and photos and awards and stuff like that, all that sort of thing. But really, I mean, we're finding that our biggest exposure is now through Spotify, because we've been able to land on a couple of playlists, and it's made a big difference to our numbers on Spotify. But it's still early days. I mean, you know, we're nowhere near Taylor Swift, for God's sake. You know, we're talking tens of thousands rather than millions. But it feels good that it's just going in the right direction. You know, that's really all that matters.
You've been around the music scene for quite a while. What kind of advice do you give an up-and-coming musician?
Well, and this sounds really overly sensible, because I'm almost sounding like their dad would sound. But it's like, don't worry if you have to, you know, find a means to sort of make a living doing something else, and that the music, fund the music with something else. That is not a crime. You know, we don't all have to be starving artists living in a garret that can barely afford to feed ourselves, and trying to make money from the music. You know, I think it's way more important to make sure that whatever music you're doing what you really believe in. And sometimes what you believe in may not be something that easily makes money. You know, and I just think it's way more satisfying. I mean, this whole thing about delayed gratification, that we live in an instant gratification world, and music is one of those opportunities for those of us who are lucky enough to be musicians, to experience the delayed gratification of writing, rehearsing, recording, gigging, and seeing something become really better and better and better and better over quite a long period of time. You know, that's intensely satisfying. And it's particularly satisfying if you've done the kind of music that you really believed in from the get-go, from the beginning, that you haven't compromised. It's why, you know, interesting that you've asked about Reverbnation. One of the things I never, ever apply for on Reverbnation is any record label who say they're looking for new artists. We're not interested in signing to a label, because the moment that you do, you're then in this situation where they're looking to you to make money, because they have to. They're businesses, and I completely respect that. But it's in trying to make bands make money that quite often the whole principle and set of principles that you work to musically start being compromised, because you start thinking about the commerciality of everything. And in today's music world, where it's so hard for labels to make money, I mean, they really struggle as well, because you'll remember, Z, when you used to probably spend $20 on a CD, or $25 on a CD, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day.
Yes.
I've still got old CDs with, I mean, we're talking pounds, obviously sterling, but with those original price tags on them. And I'm like, I can't believe I spent that amount of money on CDs.
No doubt.
But you think about that, that was a load of profit margin. That was a load of profit margin for the record companies then. They were doing very nicely, thank you, when they were selling a lot of vinyl and then a lot of CDs. Now, the streaming income for them is way, way, way lower. So the record companies are struggling to make money. So they have to be even more brutal with their artists in terms of how those artists are going to make money for them. And I'm not interested in being treated like that. So we're lucky enough to be self-funding. we scrimp and save our own cash to get into the studio to do what we do. And because we can do a little bit of it at home, but also because we found an amazing studio that doesn't break the bank, and that the engineer who runs it, a great guy called Luke Dibbins, who's really into our music, and therefore, he's very supportive of what we do. So we can produce things at not too great a cost, So what you've heard, wasn't expensive to make, but we like to think it sounds expensive.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's definitely well produced. That's for sure. The other thing I wanted to ask you too, I mean, even with the beauty of technology, you don't really need a record label. You could just do it all it's DIY, do it yourself, and distribution really is the only thing record labels are using you for, or you can use them for.
And their marketing and also their contacts. I mean, labels really, what they would say to you, it's who they know. Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt that if you are signed to a label, they're going to open doors for you. They're going to get you into festivals. They're going to get you gigs. There's no question that's the benefit, but it's at what cost? Right. And usually what you find you have to do to get that benefit when you sign to a label is you sign all of the rights to your music over to them, and they control everything.
Yep.
So nothing is yours anymore. And, a lot of young artists, you can tell I'm not a young artist. I'm a slightly older artist, but I can completely understand. I mean, Elia in our band is much, much younger. She's 25. And, I'm quite pleased that I kind of control things to the point where I know that she's not going to get exploited. But whatever happens to us, whatever we do.
There's a lot of sharks in the industry, that's for sure. Especially when they see a young woman like that who can sing her ass off, they come after her. They do. They'll try to take her away from you, and they're evil. It's an evil entity sometimes.
Yeah, it is, and they have to be even more of a shark now than they used to be, and they've always been sharks.
Yep.
And now they have to be really brutal to try and make any money at all. So. I think we are protecting ourselves by not being tempted by that. And it may mean that we will never be, our music is a bit niche anyway. It's not massively commercial. It's accessible, I would say. You tell me.
Music. Yeah, it's good. It's good, feel good music until you listen to the lyrics.
Well, yeah. And then you go, geez, there's something else to it. There's some more depth.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what we want. This, in some respects, is what we'd really like to happen, is that someone gets into our music because they think, I can, as you say, I can happily do the vacuuming, do the hoovering to this. This is great on a Saturday or, on a nice sunny afternoon. But then if they sit down and actually listen to what's being said, they go, all right, okay, there's something more to this. There's some greater substance to it. And that would get them into the music even more. That's perfection from my point of view. But that's not easy to get because, let's face it, everyone's got thousands and thousands and thousands of songs on here,
Yep.
And, to really get into anybody. I'm old enough to know that I used to buy vinyl and you would listen to that album that you bought back in the day so many times. You would get so into them because you couldn't afford to buy that much. Mm-hmm. So those first records that I have and still have somewhere, you play to death. I know them still so intimately, and I'm not sure how easy it is for people now with so much choice to have that depth of experience with the music that they get into. I don't know. What do you think?
It's something I talk about all the time on this podcast is the experience of the vinyl. You get involved with it. You read the liner notes. You know all the members of the band. You know their dog's name. You know the lyrics, everything. You get involved with it. It's an experience. Now when you're listening to tunes off of Spotify, nothing against Spotify. I think it's a great platform and it introduces me to a lot of music, but you don't get involved with it. It just turns into background music because it's on Spotify. Where the vinyl experience is you sit in your room and you read every word on that album and you buy it because the art is cool on the cover, and it's just a whole experience. And that's what's actually lacking from music too, is like you don't get involved with the music. You listen to it, and you hear it, but but you're not visually experiencing it if it's not on a video platform. You know, that's you're not looking at the artwork on the cover and not reading the lyrics and going along. Well, let's skip to track 2. You know, there's none of that. You know, when you have vinyl, you have to listen to it all the way through. And that's
exactly.
I feel like that whole experience and getting involved with an album is what's missing from music these days.
It is missing, but it's also growing as well. It's amazing how many young people are now have bought turntables and are getting into vinyl.
Great
albeit
point.
that
You're right.
It's expensive for them, but it's much smaller than it ever was.
Mm-hmm.
But that's exactly what artists want. Artists want people, and I think, because I'm still guilty of this, or I'm proud of it, I should say, not guilty of it. I'm proud of the fact that I still listen to albums end to end, that I still have vinyl, and that if I'm going to listen to something, I owe it to the artist to not do something else. I owe it to the artist to give them my full attention.
Yeah.
You know, and if ever, it's very hard to know when you're on Spotify and you see your streaming numbers. You think, oh, that's quite nice, but you have no idea whether anyone's really listened to that in the way that I know I really listen to the music I'm into. And that's what we'd all want as artists, as creative people, is simply to feel that even if it's relatively small numbers of people, it's made a difference to them. You know, that they've had, if anyone has the experience of listening to us that I had or still have, listening to, you name it, Pink Floyd or Led Zeppelin, or, you know, going way back, or any of the jazz guys that I'm really into, you know, Wayne Shorter and Miles Davis and all this kind of stuff. If anyone has the same experience listening to us as I have listening to that, that would be unbelievable. But it's very hard to know whether people are or not.
Yeah.
The only time go on.
Are there any new bands you could put on my radar? I know you triggered something. Is there anybody like you can turn me on to? And if so, send me links and stuff like that too, because I love exploring new music. But who are you listening to these days?
I'm just going to mention one band who are not brand new, and actually they're on the Sony label and they're pretty big. I don't know if you've heard of them, but I think they are extraordinary. They're called Everything Everything. Have you heard of them?
No.
Right. They're a British band. And I just think they have an extraordinary creative ability. They're kind of, how would you describe them? They use electronic music in really creative ways, but they have, you know, amazing musicians, you know, playing acoustic, well, drums, guitar, you know, this kind of thing. So it's this amazing balance of real instruments and electronica. The songs are incredibly powerful. I think they're kind of like a latter-day Radiohead.
Okay.
And the vocalist is just extraordinary. He has this voice that shifts between a kind of, you know, I'm going to get slightly technical here as a singer, but from a chest voice to a falsetto. And he has this incredible range, and it's really powerful. And I just think they probably made, I'm thinking, they probably made about 6 albums. And the latest one is called Reanimator.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah. So Everything, Everything.
Everything, Everything.
And the latest album is called Reanimator, which is great. But if you were going to go backwards, I'd definitely get into Get to Heaven. That's a brilliant album, Get to Heaven. And also there's one called Fever Dream. So they're the last three albums. And the early stuff's great too. But the last 3 albums, I just think they're a great example of a band that's just getting better and better and better. And the musicianship is fantastic, and the musicality and the writing, you can't beat them. So if you do anything, just listen to those guys. I think they're amazing.
Awesome, man. Thank you for putting new music on my radar. I'll go listen to it right after we get done with this podcast. One final question before we get out of here. And Phil, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come hang out with me. But is there anything you'd like to see stick around after COVID's done?
Stick around? At a personal level, I kind of like to, what I'd like to stick around is giving myself the time to write. You know, in some respects, I was slightly forced into writing as much as I did in the last year, because what else are you going to do? You know, you're at home, you're not working, and you're bored. I mean, boredom can be a really good thing for creativity, you know? So in some respects, I'd like to be able to think that we all learn that actually we need more downtime. You know, we need to be a bit more idle in order to be more creative. That when people don't give themselves enough staring out of the window time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to be creative, I mean, I think it was Picasso said before, and he was really productive. I mean, Picasso, you know, painted and sculpted so much stuff, but he used to say, before I can create anything, I have to do a whole lot of nothing. And we don't do enough nothing.
You got to reach.
And I've done quite a lot. Yeah, it's really important. I've done quite a lot of nothing this year, which has been really good for me then doing something. I think I've been more creative because I've given myself the time, because I've had an excuse, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what I'd like to keep going out of COVID.
Helps recharge the creative batteries.
Yeah. And to realize that actually sometimes your creativity comes out of nowhere, and comes out of nothing. And you don't know when it's going to hit you.
Indeed. And that's exactly what happened in 2020.
Exactly. Yeah. More than we could have imagined.
Exactly. Phil, a great conversation. I'm going to bring the whole band, well, not the whole band back on, but a couple of your members back on in a couple of weeks, and that's going to happen in January the 21st. So I'm looking forward to chopping up with the rest of your bandmates. This has been a great conversation. And before we get out of here, tell everybody where they can find your music and how they can search you out. Okay. Well, the best way to get us directly on the streaming platforms is just go look for Biscay on Spotify or Biscay Music. That's our kind of handle on social stuff. So Biscay Music on Facebook and things like that. But the best place really to kind of check it all out is the website, which is www.biscay.co.uk. So it even rhymes, biscay.co.uk. Gotcha. You could turn that to a hip hop song. It could do. Yeah. I'm not going to be the guy to write it, though. Oh, man. Great conversation, man. Thank you so much for hanging out. Right. And big ups to my friends over at Reverbnation for hooking us up with this. I do have another winner of this contest coming up in next week, Jupiter Rising. Great band out of Philly, Phil. You should check them out. Philadelphia, okay, I will. Pennsylvania. I'm going to write that down. Very soul, funky, rock, funk. Yeah, they're called Jupiter Rising. Great band. Awesome band. That's coming up next week that I get to talk to those guys. So, yeah, man, thanks again. Shout out to EJA Moving Services, attorney Dave Longaretti, Utica Coffee, and Saranac Brewery. If not for our sponsors, this podcast is not possible. And thank you so much to you for out there listening. If you're out there in the Facebook land, click the share button and help spread the word of Disruption Network, EC Radio. And, of course, my guest, Biscay. Great band. Check them out, people. Go to Spotify right now. Follow them on Spotify and go funk out to them, man, because I'm telling you, these guys are great. They're going to have you up and move. And if you can't move to these guys, then you have no soul. That's pretty much how it goes. Phil, thanks again, man. Have a good day. Find us at disruptionnetwork.net. Everybody else, have a good day. Later.